Hello, I'm Ryan McEachern, and welcome to The Dig, where we uncover the latest news, events, and topics relevant to our industry. Every business has been affected by this pandemic. Some have had to shut down while others keep going as an essential service. They had to figure out on the fly how to keep their employees safe while keeping their businesses operating. What can we learn from these companies? One such company is McCue Engineering from Vancouver. And today we are joined by co-founder Chris McCue to share his experience. So hi, Chris, welcome to The Dig.
Hey, Ryan, good to see you.
Your company was deemed an essential service. What does that actually mean?
Well, we do water treatment, and since the snow is melting and rain is falling and the mines are filling with water, we're required to go out and assist the mines to ensure that contaminated water doesn't reach the environment.
Excellent. So, being part of this whole, pandemic, you had projects you had to execute on.
We did, yes, we did. We had a project up in northern British Columbia. Thankfully, we were able to drive to that project, so we didn't have to get in an airplane, which nobody wanted to do. And our guys ended up driving in separate vehicles. That's how we got around the 6 feet rule. We even went out to the vans and measured, and no good. And so they all drove up in their own vehicles. And then when we got to site, we were required to sign some documentation that indicated that we had not had any symptoms of sickness, and that we had been socially isolating for 14 days.
Right. So some of those procedures that you were talking about, was there the government providing those guidelines, or how were you coming up with these procedures?
Well, we used the government guidelines as best we could. I think they're purposefully vague because they have to cover so many different facets of the economy or of work. And so what we did was we have a joint health and safety committee that is comprised of we have management, owner, and also field persons represented in that committee. And so we sat down and, using the government guidelines, came up with a plan that made the people who are going out to the field feel comfortable. They helped develop it, so they were happy to go.
Was it easy to get PPE and everything you needed to be set up?
No, it wasn't easy to get PPE. We have obviously accounts with different companies that supply it to us. They had nothing. The N95 masks were particularly hard to get. We ended up sending our people up with the few N95 masks we had in stock already. And we also sent them up with half-mask respirators that had filter cartridges in them for particulate. And then our business administrator volunteered to make the mask. So she sewed every person in the company one mask that was washable and reusable. None of that we could get online or from stores locally.
It seems to be something I've heard from several people, is that whole supply for PPE really was problematic, because we know they were taking care of the frontline workers at the hospitals, and rightly so, in all the areas that were what we would call high-risk locations. But as an essential service, you're still considered to keep working.
Yeah.
That must have been quite the challenge.
It was, yeah. I think that the unknown is always the worry, and I think that once our guys got on site, and that not only were our guys worried, but also the people who were on site were worried. And the site is near a small town, and they were worried. In fact, they were phoning the mine site apparently every day to ask about us, our guys, because we were coming from the city. And so they thought of us as like the infected, right? But and we were worried because it was an in and out mine camp. So there's people coming from all over the place. It ended up that once we got out there, everything was fine. Our guys worked mostly by themselves anyway. And it was kind of funny. We had a guy one of our guys in our crew was from the interior of BC, and he was the guy who was allowed to go into the kitchen and get the food for the rest of our guys who are from the city. So they didn't eat in the kitchen, which was fine with them. They all ate in their hotel room or at the site. And this one guy he took all their orders, and then he would go and get them their food. It's pretty funny.
Well, and it's interesting. I think moving forward, as companies start to engage with each other, there's going to be a potential stigma of companies coming from the urban areas or what are hotspots and coming into their area, and the stress and anxiety that's tied to that.
Yes, absolutely. That is exactly what is happening. We have guys that are on site again now. There wasn't as much worry because these two guys have already been on site. But yeah, like I think that's for sure is going to be a worry. I think that maybe there's a misconception of what it's actually like in the urban areas, like how bad it is and how many people have it. And then of course the northern areas don't have the medical facilities we have in the south. So I think that's where the worry comes from. But one thing is we're all taking this very seriously. Like we're taking it very seriously. They're taking it very seriously. And so there's a little bit of a level of comfort there as well.
Right. And did you mention how you got there? It was by land?
We drove, yeah.
So I can imagine also companies that are thinking about flying, that's just adding another layer of complexity. And we're still talking about doing a job within the boundaries of a province,
yes.
which has oversight over that region. I'm sure the complexity is going to increase as you look at jobs outside your own province.
Yep, for sure. We have been talking to another company about some work in the Yukon, and currently you're required to do a mandatory 14-day isolation in Whitehorse before you travel to site. Now, recently, I think the Yukon is saying they're going to end that restriction, I think, as of July the 1st. So that'll make it easier for our people. But one of the tricks, if that quarantine stays, is that you have ridiculously long shifts. There's no more 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out because you got 2 weeks of quarantine. So we were setting our guys up for 6 to 8 weeks on site, and we had to completely alter the way that week was going to work because we needed to give them a day off. Otherwise, they would be so fatigued they wouldn't be able to work. Right. So hopefully this restriction is going to be lifted and we won't have to go through that, and then we can go back to our standard 2 in and 2 out or whatever, however it works out. But right now, if that job goes tomorrow, it'll be 6 to 8 weeks.
Right, exactly. So it's going to be definitely interesting times for us as we move forward.
Yes.
One question to ask you as well is how were you able to actually keep your team intact? And what I mean by that is being able to keep them all employed. I know that's been a struggle for some companies.
We were able to do that. In fact, we had different issues than that. We had early on in the COVID thing, we had people who had symptoms of sickness, and our policy, and I believe the government's policy, was that if you've got symptoms of sickness, then you've got to quarantine. So we had people that were quarantined that didn't have COVID; they just had a cold or something, and we ended up that we were short-staffed. And then we also had some issues with we couldn't get our people tested. And we had a guy who was, because he was with a roommate who was sick and who definitely had symptoms of COVID, he ended up being stuck in his apartment for almost a month. We couldn't get him on a site, even though he wasn't sick. His roommate was sick. And then his roommate didn't even have COVID. Eventually they tested him.
Wow, that's that certainly adds another layer of complexity.
It does. Yeah, it's hard. You schedule people for a job, and then they're like, "Oh, I got a sore throat," and you're like, "Oh."
Yeah, then the next thing, and with say potential clients, are you actually getting, are you asked to bid on work right now, and if so, are they asking you to kind of buffer it, knowing that there's this kind of world of COVID, or are they not even bothering to ask you?
They're asking for COVID plans that have to go into your bid. So yeah, everyone's taking it pretty seriously so far as I can tell.
Right, and so in terms though of that gap, say potential quarantine and the delays required to that, are they expecting you to absorb that burden and cost, or are they realistic in saying, listen, we understand the new reality?
They're pretty realistic. They're not expecting us to pay for it. There is some negotiation about the amount of hours that that they want you to charge for those days. So just as an example, if you're doing a 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out, then you're working 12 hours a day. But in quarantine, we're not working any hours, but they only, like a lot of them are trying to negotiate you down to 8 hours a day. So it's a bit tricky too, because your guys are still out of town, you know?
Right,
So
right.
We're doing the best we can, but we have to look out, we have to give our clients good service, but we also have to look out for our people too. So there's some negotiation in there.
Right, certainly, certainly. And I can imagine also there's this, you know, you have your own set of procedures, which it sounds great. You've kind of co-created with your employees, which must add some form of safety and comfort from them, that they're not, you know, taking it from the higher ups. But you know, there must be a clash also with the on-site policies and procedures of your client. How are you dealing with that?
Well, we have our own health and safety plan and our health and safety policy, and our policy is what we use as the minimum. So if when we go on site and if there's a policy that our client has that is more safe than what that our basic plan is, then we just default to their higher level of safety. So ours is our COVID planning is the same way. So we have a very good and solid plan for COVID, but if our client wants us to do something else, something higher up, then we'll default to that higher level. We won't go below our health and safety policy, only above. So that's kind of how we're dealing with it.
Right. So if you had to, you know, provide some additional advice from what we've already talked about to a company that's, you know, looking to start up and get their business going again, what do you think? What are some of the recommendations you could provide them?
Well, I think if they're going to go from the city into the remote areas of the province or wherever they're from, I think planning is really going to be key. Like, I think that people should have their ducks in a row now. So knowing that they're going to have to do some COVID planning, and knowing that these people that are outside the city are a little nervous of people from the city. And I think showing them that we're prepared and we understand that could go a long way. And it's going to have to be done anyway, but I think that could be a differentiator.
Thanks, Chris. It's been a real pleasure having you, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Ryan. Always good to see you.
And thank you for joining us on The Dig. If you have a story you wish to share, contact us at thedig@mstacanada.ca. Also, we're looking for new members. If your company sells a product or service to the mining industry and you're looking for ways to grow your business, join MSTA Canada. I'm Ryan McEachern. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, stay safe.